Oh yeah, it's that time. Happy hump day, ladies and gentlemen. It's 4:30 somewhere. Man, we got a lot to talk about today, my good buddy Steve. I always forget how to pronounce the last name. I believe it's Ploetz. Steve Ploetz joining us, one of our favorite all-time guests, one of the, I would say, the most highly requested guest.
Well, that's because I'm leading the league with 3 requests. What's the?
We don't have to get super specific, do we? I mean, this isn't like a tell-all, is it? What did I sign up for here? No, frequently, Steve. You'd be surprised. Comments, because I do go through the comments. You know, I look for the comments. Let me turn this off. I go through the comments, not as often as I probably should. They're like, when are you going to do another segment with Steve? When are you going to do another segment with Steve? So the people have requested. These are Steve's trolls, by the way. They're probably like little kids that he's paying money. Like he sees them, they have a lemonade stand. He's like, hey, I got a better idea.
Yeah, exactly.
You got a phone? All right, let's get
it. I love it.
Okay, so here's the deal. Bunch of data. The frame here today, Stephen, you know as much as anyone that I am not a perma bull when it comes to real estate. Many, many times in the past, I have been bearish. I have been negative. I have been everything in between. You can account for that. And I like to call it like it is. We look at the surface level right now. We can see what's going on. We have to talk about some of these things that are being really widely shared, and just dive into it and say, well, what's really going on here? I will touch on this just to kind of kick things off. Mortgage rates, of course, as a mortgage guy, everyone always asks me, what are mortgage rates? And what's interesting about what's going on with mortgage bonds right now is we've seen a pretty decent rally. If we go back to last Friday, we had a huge day. You know, we're up 69 basis points on Friday. Huge day. And then we've been sideways so far this week right here. But rates have not really recovered a whole lot. And this is just sort of overall the banks kind of showing their hand that they don't buy it, that their expectation, because remember, when a bank is pricing a loan today, they aren't going to deliver that loan to whichever servicer they're selling it to for at least 6 months. So they're always trying to kind of predict the future a little bit when it comes to this stuff. And as of this moment right now, they are not buying that this is some sort of rally that's going to continue. They're kind of pricing as though, you know, actually more downside for bonds, which means rates to increase. So as of right now, average interest rates for Mortgage News Daily, 30-year fixed right around 7%, 15-year fixed 6.4%, 30-year FHA 6.7%, VA 6.7%. My rates are about 0.25% lower than that, except for the conventional rate is right on the money, right around 7 1/8. You can even get to the 6s if you're putting a lot down. FHA, VA, mid to low, say like 6 1/4, 6.5. On the jumbos, we just locked one at 6.4 on a 5-year arm. So you do have that possibility. And high balance conventional, there is some 5-year arms as well. Just locked one of those at 6.75. So rates aren't great. They're not terrible. They've been worse in recent, months, but they're not the kind of rates that get people out of bed in the morning, Steve. To go shop for homes. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Are there any objections, like rate wise, that you've been seeing either from buyers who have come to your listings and said, you know what, we're just going to wait till rates are a little bit lower, or maybe buyers that you've been working with who are like, you know what, we do like these homes that we're seeing, but it's rates that are holding us back? Or do you feel like the lack of inventory is a bigger issue at the moment?
It's a great question. And I would say there's a ton of objections out right now. Everybody's got an objection in terms of what's going on, where things are at. I will tell you, I did an hour-long phone call with first-time home buyers last night. And husband and wife, she's pregnant. They're trying to get into their first place. And they are working diligently to stay within a budget. And
yes,
as he said, the husband, he said, it's hard for me to just wrap my arms around this market that year over year. And he's like, I'm trying to not look backwards, but year over year, the values have gone up and the interest rate has come up. and it's getting harder and harder for us to get in. And we get it. We feel like we need to buy a home as a good investment and all the different things that we're all aware of. But he's like, or I can put my money in a CD or a short-term bond, and I can make 5%. So I like purely looking, and he's a CPA, so he comes with a financial background. The rates hurt. The rates are a bummer, and I would say it absolutely is an objection. And I think that we oftentimes, certainly that conversation was getting into a discussion about tell me why you need a home, because why you need a home is you need a place to raise your kids, and you need some ownership in this market. And as you and I, D Money, have talked about 20 times, the way to wealth is pay your mortgage, max out your 401k, and 30 years from now, assuming you don't refinance, obviously there's other variables that go into it, but I mean, then your median sales price today is what, 850,000, maybe slightly less, 800,000 in San Diego County. You're in a situation where you own an asset. If the value didn't go up at all, which of course the expectation is it would, you're in something close to $1 million. You've got a fully funded 401k. You're wealthy. Nobody can talk about what the money is actually going to be worth at that time.
It's true. You don't have to do a whole lot. If you make your mortgage payment on time for 30 years and you max out your 401k, you're going to be great. You're going to be very.
And here's
very
pro
well
tip. Pro tip is you can't pay off your house if you don't own it. So eventually you got to jump in. And I feel like it's the age old thing that you and I have talked about, which was 2005 a good time to buy? As you have said, there's only bad times to sell. There's not bad times to buy. You got to be in something that a payment that you can afford. Certainly there still are these temporary buy downs, the 2-1, the 3-2-1. Like, as I feel like as agents, we've forgotten about those. But I mean, yes, the interest rate is tricky, but what's more tricky is the lack of inventory. And that's really what's pushing this. So
I think, yeah. And we see here, and this is from, let's see, what was this? Fortune, I think. Yeah. Fortune magazine, the website. Housing market seller strike is what they're calling it, which is a hilarious way to put it. I haven't seen anyone phrase it that way. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to give them some play today. This is an article from yesterday. Seller strike. So ruthless. This is so well put. Only 7 of the nation's 200 largest markets have the same inventory levels. Inventory levels are back to where they were pre-pandemic. So 193 out of 200 markets. I mean, this is, what is that? 97%, 96, 97% of the top 200 markets still not back to pre-pandemic inventory levels.
And as you're aware, San Diego County is below pandemic inventory levels.
Anemic.
So this is talking about, hey, 2019, let's get back to those values, that level of, or excuse me, 2021. Let's get back to those levels of inventory. Then I've forgotten when pandemic was. It was 2020. So yeah, right. 2019, back to those levels of inventory. 2020 comes around, the inventory drops. Today, 2023 in San Diego County, we're at inventory levels below that. And that's what's driving this market, is the idea that, hey, demand is coming down because of these interest rates which have come up, but supply is zero. I mean, it's not exactly zero, but it's definitely few and far between.
But Steve, what about the impending crash in real estate that must take place at some point? So let me answer. So here's the thing, and I don't mean to make light of it, because I lived through the crash. I coached people through the crash. I talked to people on the phone who killed themselves. Okay, during not while I was on the phone with them, but eventually did because of what happened during the crash. So believe me, if anyone has a soft spot for what happened in the crash, I don't want to ever make light of it or seem like I'm making light of it. But it is, when I hear people say, well, it has to crash because things are too expensive. Okay, so does a Rolex have to go down to $400 because that's what you think it should be worth? No, that's not how markets work. And for me, Steve, the biggest thing is, and I look at, and I've been saying this for years, cost approach. You tell me, how much does it cost me to build this house from scratch? That's all I need to know. if it costs me less to build this house from scratch, that would make sense, right? If you say, hey, this house that's for sale for 800,000, you could build it on your own. It'll take you 2 years,
Right.
but it'll only cost you 700,000 and you'll save 100 grand, right? You'll have to go through all these headaches. You have to do all this stuff, but you know what? You'll save $100,000 and you'll have it done just the way you want it. Now, if that were the way it was, then I could understand why people might say, well, it's a little bit frothy, but you're paying for time. I'm buying the house for 800 today because I don't have to spend those 2 years. I don't have to spend all those long nights. I don't have to go hang sheetrock myself, to build this house. But that's not how it is. It's actually much more expensive to build a home. If you look at cost approach, all these homes, all of these appraisals I see, everything, way more expensive to build these homes than it is that people are buying. And you don't have to go through the time or the hassle. That, Steve, makes no sense. This means prices should be higher. And so it really doesn't make a whole lot of difference what we think or what we want or what we believe to be reasonable. That really doesn't matter. Right. A market is comprised of supply and demand, and that's basically it. And as it stands right now, until it's much cheaper to build homes, and no one talks about this, and I will talk about this, the only thing that I see that's a potentially on the horizon of the realm of stratospheric possibility that could cause homes to get cheaper is if somewhere, somebody, somehow, maybe it's a big builder, figures out a quick and inexpensive way to build homes, potentially with a gigantic 3D printer or some sort of AI or some sort of robotic technology that would be able to say, hey, here's a lot. We can have the robot scan the lot, and then we can just feed it, this metal, and it just melts it all into this perfect shape. And it only takes 48 hours, and you've got everything here. I mean, until something like that comes along, and that's possible. I mean, some of the stuff they're doing at Tesla, the things that they're doing with AI, the things that are happening with robotics, androids, artificial intelligence, all that stuff, 3D printing, it could happen. It could happen. As of right now,
and I think with that, there'd probably be a lot of resistance, because those of us that own a home, all of a sudden we wouldn't want to see yes, I agree. There's a lot of different possibilities, and I absolutely expect that the real estate market will change and the way that we do business as realtors will change. There's already discussions about commission makeups and how a buyer representation and those kinds of things. But I think that the challenge is when the vast majority of people are in it in the traditional way, change is hard. And if a builder can figure out, I agree with you, there's absolutely a housing shortage. We absolutely need more good homes built in good neighborhoods and to build good neighborhoods. But I just don't see the incentive from average Joe consumer on why he would want to do that once he already owns a home. The high values are good for sellers. The high values are good for people that are homeowners.
Well, then see, and that's the other assumption that you would make if in that theory. And I'm just putting that out there because I think about everything, every possibility. And in that scenario where we were 3D printing homes for very cheap, the assumption that you would make to think that would be a good thing for buyers is that the builders would be willing to sell them for under market value, current market value.
Right.
That there would be some sort of reason for them to do that. In other words, they had competition. There's all these other, builders that are doing the same thing. And this guys are saying they can build your house for 200,000. So they need to say for 189, and that there's some sort of competition like that, some sort of surplus inventory. Even if a builder was able to figure this out, they would pocket the difference, guys.
Oh, absolutely.
They would just sell it for the same price, whatever the market value is, whatever someone's willing to pay for it. And if they got to build it with less human beings and at a way lower cost basis, they would just pocket the difference. So it wouldn't trickle down unless some philanthropist figured it out. It'd have to be a billionaire. It'd have to be an Elon Musk thing or something. Like somebody would have to come in and say, listen, we'll build these houses, we'll sell them to you for cost because that's just the right thing to do. But that would, also cause a lot of kickback and a lot of issues. But the person who bought that house wouldn't necessarily, turn around and sell it to the next guy for a discount. They go, wait a minute, you give me this house for 200,000, it's worth 800.
So with that, because I'm with you, like I like to look at it from the most simplistic form of supply and demand.
Yes. That's all it is.
Give me an opinion. We certainly have seen the correlation between interest rates and demand. Help me understand what brings supply up, in your opinion. How do we get more supply?
Get more supply?
Because
that's the problem.
And as is traditional, I'll ask you a question and then immediately interrupt you so you can't answer it.
So you can answer it and not me. No. Okay.
So my title rep said to me yesterday, she said all of the listings that she has seen are divorce and death. Like, that's it. And so then I actually ran through my own inventory and I was like, let me see. And to her credit, 75 to 80% of the listings that we have coming are divorce or a death of somebody, or I don't mean this to sound as bad as it sounds, but like a pending death, like somebody is in assisted care kind of situation. So there's always those. Now you can answer the question I asked 6 minutes ago.
What remind me what the question was again?
When are we going to? What would be a factor? What would be the reason that we would see more houses hit the market?
The only thing that I can think of right now, realistically, is lower interest rates. So you get lower interest. So I don't know if I sent this to you or not, Steve. I need to get you make sure you're on my list, because I did send this out this week, and I'm looking through here, and I don't think you got it. So I need to make sure I get you on my list. But essentially, so Zillow did a survey, really, really good stuff, of home sellers, and they found that a huge percentage of the people who are selling have interest rates over 5%. And we know people with lower interest rates are more hesitant to sell. Right. And so people with higher interest rates more willing to sell, because it's not as big of a delta for them to go on to the next place. Yeah. And figure out the move up, move down situation at 6.5% or 7% versus 5%. But if you have 2.5%, it's just too much to swallow. Right. So I think rates coming down will spur an insane boom in the real estate marketplace, where you'll have so much more inventory. Prices will boom, because there'll be way more buyers in the marketplace.
Yeah, all the demand, all those buyers sitting on the fence, they'll jump in.
They'll be in. All the sellers on the fence, they'll be in. And so, the sell buyers is who I'm really talking about there. The people who want to sell and buy. Right. So let's talk about that. Like, as of right now, the people who don't understand, what you have to do is don't try to predict necessarily what the market's going to do next, but listen to what the market is telling you. So you don't have to guess right the next move, but you should listen. You should listen. And one of the most important lessons we learned during the pandemic was that when the shit hits the fan, people ran to real estate, not away from it. They ran to it. That was a huge indicator, and it has carried through. Now, let's take a look at some of these things here. Got a few headlines I want to share with you today. So, mortgage credit availability sinks to decade low. So, the availability of mortgage credit, in other words, banks tightening. What happened the last time the market crashed? Exact opposite. Banks were doing the exact opposite. They were loosening. They were making things more available. They were giving credit to people who didn't deserve it. You didn't have to income qualify. You didn't have to credit qualify. You just had to be alive to qualify. You didn't even need a credit score. Mortgage demand also dropped after the FHA interest rates hit a 21-year high on average. Okay. And so we're seeing mortgage demand at extremely low levels, mortgage credit availability at really low levels. Yet, because of, even with that, and interest rates are about double today what they were a year and a half ago when rates really started to go up. Okay. And look at you, Diana Olick. It looks like you're sitting right next to her right now on the screen. You see that? Diana, how you doing? How you doing? Hey, shake your hand. So here's how much cash you can have in your home thanks to new record high prices. Okay. Yeah. So what is the market telling us right here? We have record high prices right now. Home equity also hits record high. Makes sense, right? If we have record high prices, home equity be record high, right? Which shows you that there's less debt with respect to the value of these homes than there ever has been. So record high equity, record high home prices, even though mortgage demand is low, credit availability is low, decade low, What is that telling us? So if we were in a fight, Steve, if you and I were in the cage, and I hit you with a really good punch, and then I hit you with another one, but you didn't really phase you. Like you still,
This sounds like real life, just so you know. Keep going.
you're really good to go. Like you're like, you know what? Actually, I'm going to set records, even after you punch me in the face. That's the market talking to you. The market is telling us something. It's giving us a message. It's saying, look, I'm stronger than you think I am.
Right.
I'm getting hit with these huge blows, and it's not real. I'm shaking them off. It's not really a big deal. That shows the resilience and the strength in the real estate market. It's truly, truly remarkable. And I had no idea the entire time I've been bullish. And you know, when I flipped, because you and I have argued about this for years, and
Right.
I was wrong in the past. I was wrong. You know it. And I've admitted it. But I did, based on new information, I did change my stance, and I have remained bullish on real estate. And now I could not have imagined that we could endure something like this. Just couldn't have imagined it.
Yeah.
Now take a look at this. Okay, home equity hits it. So look at this. Americans' credit card debt passes $1 trillion. Now, that was something that, for the first time ever, by the way. So American credit card debt passed $1 trillion, the first time ever. And you're seeing these things in the news, and you're seeing this being shared. I want you to know the truth. I just shared this on my Facebook page today. Credit card debt did eclipse $1 trillion, but as a percentage versus deposits. So in other words, we're talking about debt versus cash on hand, right? That's what deposits mean, is how much money you have deposited in the bank. So as a percentage, debt versus deposits, we have one of the lowest ratios ever. One of the lowest ratios ever. Now, we have seen record household wealth in the last 24 months. We hit a record household wealth number in the United States. So when you see the headline say, credit card debt passes $1 trillion, people are so screwed. They're going to file bankruptcy soon. You also must look at the other side of the coin and go, but wait a minute, how much cash do people have? Because the way I see it, Steve, there's two reasons why we would see debt increasing. Number one would be necessity. Hey, I have no other way to pay for stuff, so I got to use my credit cards. Number two would be comfort. I'm not worried about it. When the bill comes, I'll just pay it off, or I won't. Maybe I'll do it next month. It doesn't really matter. I'm fine. I'm trying to get my miles, bro. I want that A-list access, baby. I want free flights. So it's two schools of thought, right? And you can, if you think about your own life, you can probably, I know there were times when I was using my credit cards to survive before I filed for bankruptcy many years ago, but I remember what it was like. I remember being there and being like, yeah, I got to use the credit card to pay for stuff. That's how I made it. Yeah. I went to the grocery store. I know what it's like to be in that situation. Also know what it's like to be like today, where, we use the credit card to pay for everything because we want miles and we just pay it off. Not worried about it. But if you pull my credit report at the right time, you might go, oh, he has some credit card debt.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So we have to look at both sides of that coin and not just go, oh, credit card debt. Yep, here it comes. Here it comes. That's step number one. Have to be more researched than that, than to just buy into these headlines. And you have to listen to the market when it's speaking to you. And Steve, I've been surprised personally by the resilience of the real estate market, that it's been so strong.
Well, I mean, I think it's certainly counterintuitive. I mean, the idea that prices go up and affordability goes down and interest rates continue to go up. I mean, the buyers just get further and further behind. The feeling of, and I think that buyers experienced a similar kind of, not to overuse a word, but trauma, that they went through the same kind of trauma in COVID of feeling like, hey, I'm getting beat up. We're getting beat out. But at that time, I think everybody felt like the market is going haywire, get in now and rising tide. And I think now this market, because of the rising interest rates and because of the volatility within, as we talked about before we started here, the volatility within the stock market over the last several years. I mean, taking more of a macro picture of up 2020, up 2021, down significantly 2022, now back up 2023. I feel like that in these circumstances, it makes everybody a little bit uneasy. People do well in their stocks and they feel like maybe this is the top. Maybe I should take some money off the table. I'd love to see appreciation of 6% across the board, something constant, something stable, because then I think that's healthier for the market. Now that said, I will say that if interest rates stayed at 7% for a year, we would all get comfortable with it. Like we would get used to it after a little while, and we would just feel like, hey, that's the way that it is. And I think that the more that there are these temporary buy downs and like solutions to problems, the more that we feel like the interest rate really is a problem. But to me, one of my takeaways from what you said very early on there, you said you just locked two different people at a 5-1 arm. And
Yeah.
I feel like those people are forward thinking, that they're thinking, hey, in the next 5 years, I'm going to be able to refinance this because the data that I'm looking at as a buyer that's in a 5-1 arm is the interest rate is going to come down and I'm going to be able to refi into something that either is a lower interest rate that'll be fixed, or I expect that this market will continue to go up in terms of values and I'll be able to sell in 5 years and I won't get caught. So,
Well, there's the traditional thought process on that, just from the mortgage perspective, is that you want to get an adjustable rate when rates are higher,
right,
and you'll get a fixed rate when rates are lower. And that's just conventional. So how do you know when rates are higher or lower? Well, we can feel now that we're in a higher interest rate environment. We've had the
absolutely.
Fed raise rates from 0 to 5.5. You know, we've gone from 2 something mortgages to 7. So we can kind of, you can see that, hey, this is a higher rate environment. When we were in the 2s, we were making record lows and it was in the news every day. That's a lower rate environment. So you don't have to be a genius to like figure out some Rubik's Cube. You can just sort of, look at what's obvious, what's obviously right in front of you. And I want to ask you a question, Steve, about Robert Schiller. I'll give you a second to think about it, who said that he believes that when rates start to go down a little bit, that there will be an urgency that's lost in buyers, because right now, as rates are climbing, buyers have an urgency in them
I
that,
agree.
well, I need to get in before rates go even higher.
Right.
And he believes that might go away and actually hurt the real estate market.
So here's what I have to say to that. If you're a realtor for one day, you start to get people that say stuff like, hey, if the market ever goes down, or if you ever see some crazy low opportunity, give me a call because I want to buy a steal. And so here's my experience, my personal experience. COVID comes around, March 2020. Everything grinds to a halt. I start making calls. And I called 45 people of all just, hey, I've got time. We're all at home. Let me go through everybody that I've got and let's see everybody that was looking for a steal. I called 45 people. Nobody jumped off. Nobody was like, I'm in, I'm going to buy. Like 90% of those people said, I want to see how low it's going to go. Let's see where the bottom is at. I hear you. Thank you for calling, but let me wait it out. So I do agree with him that as interest rates come up, there is the urgency of, hey, if Mr. Buyer, Miss Buyer, if you don't get in right now, you might not be able to afford a house at all because it's a supply-driven market. The values appear to continue to be going up. And at 7%, if it jumps to 8%, like let's look at what's going to happen to your monthly payment. So from that standpoint, this guy sounds super smart.
Well, he's one of those Ivy League guys,
Yeah.
But I mean, the thing that's interesting to me about it is I do understand that aspect of it. I do think it's the minority of people though who think that way. I think lower interest rates tend to get people more excited about the market, as opposed to, so it's sort of like the positive reinforcement versus negative reinforcement, and I think that if you are looking at the market like, well, I need to get in now or something bad's going to happen, or it's going to get worse for me.
And it also depends on the longevity of this. Like as an example, there was a period of time, I want to say in March, April, May, you know better than I, where interest rates, it felt like every 2 weeks they were going to new highs and
Yeah.
they kept going up and up and up. And in that circumstance, there becomes, yes, there's levels of urgency, but there's also the feeling like this is out of control. This isn't sustainable. This is a bad deal. I need to step away from it. In the same way that I would say, if the interest rate dropped today, some minute amount, there might be an urgency for those people that are like looking to lock and are writing offers. And then as things come down a little bit more, then we might lose that urgency. But if things continued to come down, if it was a longer period, I think people would get to the point, as we talked about before we started, about the guy that sold his business and was happy with the dollar amount. I think people would get to a point where they're like, I don't need the rock bottom rate. I'll take a rate that plugs in well with my goals and my plan. And yes, let's do this, and we can go fixed on this for a long period of time.
Well, I think the biggest problem with his theory for me is that it assumes that the buyer has some sort of control over it. Like, I can't tell you how many people I've got, somebody I need to run numbers for right now. In fact, they've been writing offer after offer after offer, FHA buyer buying at a very competitive detached home price point and just haven't been able to get into anything. So it's like they would have loved to have executed when rates were at 6 instead of 7. They would, you know what I mean? Like it was not their choice. And so I think there's a certain understanding that but buyers have this control. Well, you have control when you're getting into the market, but when you find the house that you love and it's competitive, inventory is so scarce. They're calling it, what was it again? Seller strike.
Yeah. Seller strike.
That's the perfect way to put it. Is so ruthless. I mean, that is the best wording I've seen of this so far. It is ruthless. How few people are putting the homes on the market, and it crushes buyers because it puts, even if there are, so many buyers who've been deterred by higher interest rates or deterred by, the lack of inventory, those people are still buyers eventually. And what it is it's putting demand to the right on the timeline.
Right.
It's just kicking demand over. And you wonder why you get to a point in a market where it just goes parabolically higher. It happens because you have all these people who kick the can down the road and they all get in at the same time because they're all waiting for the same thing. So
when pent up demand, we call it. Yeah, pent up. We're just
demand.
Yep. Everybody all of a sudden something, and honestly, to your point about if interest rates dropped, yes, that'd bring a bunch of inventory, but it would pull the trigger on so many buyers that would just dive into this market that all of a sudden, hey, let's go, let's do it.
Correct.
And I certainly agree with what you're saying there, that buyers don't have control, that there is some buyers that no matter what, they're going to buy a house, whether the interest rate is 2%, 5%, 8%, they believe in real estate and they're building a home. They might adjust what they're looking for. So instead of a small single family, now they're looking for a townhome condo. But I think that what would also happen is with the investor side. And I think that's kind of what my boy George is talking about when he's talking about, would there be less urgency? I think he's talking more about not that owner occupied buyers are not savvy. I'm not saying that at all, but I think a more sophisticated buyer is I think who he's talking about.
Steve likes to drink his scotch with his pinky out, in case you can't tell. We are live right now, by the way. Multiple Facebook pages, YouTube's, LinkedIn, the Twitter space. Adam Lucas say, brother, are you a mortgage broker? Correct. That is correct, Adam. I am the mortgage guy. Steve is the realtor. And then what's this guy here? Homeport Residential. Derrick, you've been calling it for a long time now. Bullish on real estate. Yes, please. Yeah, I mean, have been calling for a long time. I will say Steve's been calling it for longer, but the makeup of the formula that creates that is it's kind of like Bitcoin. It's like if you don't understand it, it just doesn't make sense, and you just kind of go, and you don't understand what it is or why there would be demand for it. I'm not going to talk about that today because that is way more complicated than real estate. But when you look at real estate, it's more simplistic. Like the concept that people need to live somewhere. At some point, there's one of two reasons why people decide they want to buy. And this is it. And Steve, when you're doing those buyer's consultations, all you have to do is figure out which one it is. And you'll understand how to speak their language. They either are sick of paying rent, sick of it. I don't want to pay rent anymore. I feel like I'm pissing money away. There's one person. So it's for them, it's like, Worst of two evils. They don't even necessarily want to buy a house, but they just can't stand doing what they're
And
doing
it's
right
a
now.
safer bet. Yes.
So it's just like, okay, this has got to be less bad than this. I know this is bad. And then there's people who want to invest. They want to build wealth. They want to make an investment in something that is going to grow over time. And they have an investor mindset where, like, I want to be making money while I sleep. I want to wake up 7 years from now and have 6 figures of equity in my house. I want to, be that person. And that could come from someone they've talked to, a colleague, a family member, whatever, parents that tells them, yeah, well, we bought our house. We weren't really thinking about it, and then 10 years later, it doubled in value. And we were just kind of like, oh, okay, well, we still live here. We still like it, whatever. And they're going, wait a minute, what am I doing? Why am I not that person? So it's one of the two. It's one of the two. But at some point, everybody's going to get there. If you go your whole life without ever waking up one day and being that person or that person, then you are exactly who the rest of us want. We want lifelong tenants.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. No, I mean, seriously,
Right.
from the bottom of my heart, I want to give you an applause.
No, it's
because real estate investors would be nowhere without you.
And I certainly agree that people look at, it's on loop. I love it. People look at the circumstance of renting and they feel like, well, if I buy, I can't get as nice a place right now as I can rent. And 100%, that's very valid, totally valid. Like, hey, you're living in Encinitas for $5,000 a month. I hear that. And now you're trying to buy a place, even if you have $150,000 to put down, that puts you at, I mean, you would know better than I, PITI, 750,000 at 7% interest rate gets you at a payment that is probably about $5,000.
Did you say Encinitas for 750? What are we buying?
No. I'm saying Encinitas to rent for $5,000.
Oh, and you want to translate the 5,000 into
and you want to
power?
translate the $5,000 to a payment. Exactly to your point. Yeah, what can you get for 750? You're in a condo in Vista. Like that's I think that the mindset that people get into is they feel like, well, my lifestyle changes so significantly, and I'm here to tell you, let's do some rounding of numbers. My speciality, $5,000 a month is $60,000 a year. Like at $1 million price point, year over year, you need the market to drop 6% just for it to break even. Like it's those. To your point, my feeling is, and I always get passionate, and my energy gets excited, and I get going. But I do. Look at you. I do feel like buying real estate is the safer bet. Again, you got to be able to make the payment. It's got to be something that you can afford. But we got to get out of our own way that somehow we deserve this lifestyle that requires no sacrifice. And I would move, but I have to live in Encinitas. Okay, I hear you. Just going to be very hard to get ahead. And when you're spending 60 grand a year, and in order to crack into the Encinitas market, it's going to require a payment after you've put down payment, et cetera, that's 2 or 3 times that.
I think the problem is that the driving force, the real win that you get from buying a home is that eventually you don't have to have a mortgage payment, housing payment anymore. And that is a tough thing to crack through. You can tell when people do get it though. You can really see when it clicks. It's a tough thing to kind of crack the code on because everyone is so used to thinking, well, you have to have a payment. Like, well, you're always going to have a car payment. You're always going to have a housing payment. No, you don't have to. And in fact, the data is so crystal clear. Retirement age flows perfectly with average age that your home gets paid or your mortgage list. And so it just creates so many options for you. So if you begin with that thought in mind, you'll think to yourself, wait a minute, why am I using my prime earning years to not be setting myself up for that, which is just retirement strategy? Like, what's your actual retirement strategy? Your retirement strategy might be that you work. You may want to work in retirement, but you'll have a different mindset because you'll be able to give everyone the middle finger. If you don't like it, you don't like what's going on, you don't like your boss, you don't like this job, you can tell everybody to F off. Right. But you'll be retired.
Because I won't have any payments. Yeah, because you don't have any payments.
Because you're free.
Right.
You're
And
free. You're a free bird. And
it's just tricky to get a 30-year mortgage when you're 65 years old. Like,
that's
I
the
mean,
thing. So like, how old are you, and what is 30 years from now for you? If you
right,
are 40 years old, you're 70. You know.
right. Which
So
is still young in terms of life expectancy and those kinds of things. Like you'll still have, assuming God willing, 10, 15, 20, 25 years of retirement. But I just feel like it's the same graph that I saw when I was 12 that you've shown me later, which was like, hey, the person that invests in the stock market from age 16 to then 21 and then stops investing versus the person that starts at 21 and invests till they're 65. It's the same principle that you get. The only way to get ahead is to have a chip on the table. And yes, there's risk that comes with it, but frankly, there's risk that comes with renting as well. And like that money is gone. There's no sense of ownership. Like you paint a wall, you got to paint it back. You have no control over when that seller is going to sell that property. Um, I think that many times people feel like the housing market is a huge risk. And don't get me wrong, there absolutely is risk. However, it's calculated risk. And if you can get in with somebody like my guy this side, uh, I mean, get in something fixed, get in something that makes sense, get in a payment that yes, you may need to get out of. And I also think, now I'm on my soapbox, I feel like people feel like they need to go from 0 to 100. They need to go from renting to their dream home. And we've forgotten that there are appropriate steps in between, that you buy a small place and get control of that, and then you figure out from there. Maybe you keep it as a rental, maybe you sell it and take the equity and move up. Like, the expectation here is that interest rates are going to come down. I can't tell you when, but they're in the same way that there's got to be another cycle. This market has to come down in terms of value at some time. But if you're in it and you're young enough to be able to go through a cycle, it's better to be in now than to try to play the game of timing it.
make a great point. And let's talk about this. And I'd love for this to be the way that we sort of
Wrap
deliver
up.
the final piece of value in this content is there are risks in both cases. So whether you decide to rent or whether you decide to buy, you're risking something and you're gaining something in both cases. Okay. So let's talk about the rental side first. Okay. So if I'm renting, what are the pluses? The pluses are, hey, if something breaks, I call somebody else to come fix it.
If I don't like the neighborhood, I can move at the end of my lease. If it's
I
a
can
six
move in a
month
year.
lease, a year, whatever. Yep.
Whatever. I can move. So what you're paying for is those flexibilities. That's essentially what you're getting for your money, because you don't get anything else for it. You just get that potential flexibility, potential lack of liability, and that's
It's
basically it.
it's
Now you might
cheaper
also
playing your cost game. Yep.
yep,
It's cheaper to
cash
live in.
flow.
Yep. Cash flow. Yep.
So in San Diego, in some markets that is not the case, but in our market, it is cheaper to rent than it is to buy on a monthly payment basis in the vast majority of San Diego County.
Right.
And in some cases, it's really significant. Like I have people who are totally qualified to buy, bro, and they are paying about $5,500, I think, in rent in a very expensive area, in a place where houses are $1.5 to $2 million. They just have the deal of a lifetime. And every time they've tried to run numbers, it's like payments are like 11, 12 grand to buy a house that's similar to the one that they're renting. And they just can't swallow that pill. But I've asked them a million times, like, how long do you want to do this? Like, if we're here in 10 years doing the same thing over and over, are you going to be okay with that? Like, are you going to be like, gosh, what were we thinking? And just try to project out and be like, what makes sense to you, especially if you know where you want to be. As soon as you know where you want to live, where you want to raise your kids, where you want them to go to school, if you haven't prior to that, if you haven't decided that you want to buy, then that's the trigger for you right there. It's time for you to get the gun out.
And to your point, 60, like what'd you say, 5,500? So round that to 65,000 over 10 years, $650,000. That's assuming no raising rent, which of course rents will go up. And I can't say of course, but the expectation is that they'll go up. To which for that 650,000, you get nothing. You get no write-off. You're not building towards equity. You're not, like, the age-old thing that every realtor puts on their Instagram is what's the interest rate for renting? It's 100%. Like, that money is gone. So I just feel like there's got to be elements of sacrifice and understanding of, this is an investment, number one. Another thing that you said about your two pieces, either they hate renting or they're looking for a good investment. But I also feel like there's also the demographic that they just want a home. And granted, that might fit into the, hey, I just hate renting, but I want something that's mine. I want to be able to make improvements, put in better countertops, change out the toilet, like paint a wall, do all this stuff because it's mine and it's my home. And
Right.
and I think that is the American dream.
I don't want to rent, or I want to invest. Those are the two buckets.
Right.
And so as a renter, you do get some flexibility. You get to, defer some liability. And it's okay. By the way, it's okay
Right.
if part of your real estate strategy, part of your retirement strategy, which involves real estate, requires you to rent for a little while because you want to go check out different places. Maybe you want to rent an OB. Hey, I love OB. Maybe I would like to live there. Go rent there for a year. No, not quite for me. Let me try a different place. I'm going to go to Point Loma now, and I'm going to rent there for a year, and I'm going to check that out. If that's what you're doing, then it's fine. But if you're not utilizing the fact that you're renting to be learning and gaining information that will help you own something eventually, then I feel like it's a waste, because although you may get a cheaper monthly payment, when do you want a cheaper monthly payment? Do you want it now when you're prime earning years, or later when you want to retire? When do you want to have the payment that's cheaper? And that's a really easy question to answer. You just have to think about the question first. Everyone has the same answer to that. So when we're looking at those things, now when we talk about buying, it is a risk. You are risking when you're buying as well, not just when you're renting. When you're renting, you're just paying out money for those minor conveniences that you have to decide if it's really worth it or not. But when over the long haul, we know renting is not a good long-term strategy. It just isn't. No one would be able to argue that it is. But if we say, okay, what are the risks to buying now? Let's talk about that. Hey, I could buy this house and it might go down in value next year, or I may,
and let's start with that one. Let's start with that one. Tell me how that matters. Like, here's an example. Let's just say the house that I'm living in goes down to 100,000. And I have to pay off the mortgage of 600,000, and I'm in a payment that I can afford. And I look at my Zestimate or whatever, and it says the value of Steve's house, $100,000. That's a bummer. And so if I ever need to sell, it's going to be a short sale, or I'm going to have to bring money to the table. But the thing is, assuming that it's a cycle, and assuming that it's not going to stay at $100,000, and I'm in a payment that I can afford, I'm not moving. I got two little kids. Like, you tell me about, yes, other than in the same way that if I see on the Zestimate that it's quintupled in value, I guess that makes me feel better. It makes me, I guess, sleep better at night. But still, assuming that the market has gone up and a rising tide, all this stuff, now all of a sudden I'm in a situation where what I'm getting at is, we have to look at a primary residence. Yes, it's an investment, but it isn't totally an investment the way that you would purchase UPS stock or Tesla or some of this other stuff. It's a totally different asset class, and particularly when it's your primary residence. Yes, you get the tax benefits of when the time comes that you need to sell. But if you don't need to sell, whether the value is $10 million or $100,000, I'm not moving. I guess it allows me to have more equity that I can borrow against and do those kinds of things and utilize it as an ATM. But that's not really, in my opinion, the way that it was intended. So
it's not.
I'm just saying it's not as big a risk.
Let me rephrase it differently. Let's say you buy a home, and then 5 years later, when you're ready to move on, it's worth less, than what you paid for it, or something like that.
That's the risk. Yes.
That's the risk, is that when you're ready to sell it, whenever that is, it's worth less than what you paid for it. Now, if we go historically, we don't know what the future brings. But historically speaking, you would have had to have been really, really unlucky with your timing in order for that to have ever been the case. Right. And in all of those cases, if you were able to hold out for a matter of a few years, you were able to get on the other side of that. And we don't know if that's always going to be the case or not, but so far it always has been. So that's why we're very
My
confident.
business partner bought at the peak. The market dropped. She held on to it. She continued to make payments. It's 2023. She's 18 years further in her payment. Like it was. I don't doubt that there were some scary times there as the
Yeah.
market adjusted, and a lot of people got beat up. And I'm sure if you would ask her, same as you have said 100 times, Derrick, is like there's only bad times to sell.
Yeah.
So you just got to avoid the bad times to sell.
If you can do that, you're golden. I mean, most people, if you talk to people who've owned a lot of real estate, they all say the same thing, Steve. Wish I hadn't sold that one. Wish
Yeah.
I'd held on to that one. Can't believe we sold that place. God, what were we thinking? It's
Yeah.
worth triple today what it was when we sold it. Everyone wishes they hadn't sold any of it ever. That's what everyone who ever owned real estate will tell you. Wish we had never sold it.
I mean,
So
best
that's the
real
kind of
estate
stuff you
advice
want to
ever
know.
is don't sell it. California real estate, don't sell it. However, the thing is, that doesn't always make financial sense. Sometimes you need the equity in order to make the move. But if you can afford to keep it, keep it. Even with the crazy messed up tenant laws and how protected a tenant is and all the different et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, how the state protects the buyer and the tenant far more than it protects the landlord and the seller. There's a reason that the vast majority of the wealthiest people in the country have made their money in real estate. Like you don't have to be a brain surgeon to figure out like, oh, this makes sense. I just feel like CDs and stuff, you're not going to outpace the market.
It's very difficult to do. Historically speaking, it's been very, very difficult to do. So the idea behind buying a home is very much a commitment. And I think we just kind of live in a society that doesn't want to be committal to things, that wants to be sort of free flowing. And that's what they're trying to do. They are really trying to create a renter society because believe it or not, I mean, and like it or not, Wall Street wants everyone to be a renter. They want to own every single piece of real estate in this country. And if they had the means, they would already, but they don't because it's such a big market. What's going to happen though over time is you're going to see more and more and more of that corporate real estate ownership. And so I do also believe that it is our duty as those who have come before to try to figure out a way to own something that we can pass down.
Absolutely.
And that could fall in the investment category, but to say, hey, I want to have a house, but here, because I don't know if my kids are going to be able to buy a house. Like it might be. So people 10 years from now, I promise you, people will be saying that real estate was cheap in San Diego today. I guarantee it. And it's just, you could go back any 10-year period and say the same thing. It's not really a wild statement, but it's hard to believe it when you're here today that that's the way it'll be. It's just difficult. But if you talk to anyone from the past, if you look at any situation you've encountered in the past, go deep in the past, look at what happened, look what was going on, and then look what took place since then. It's really just the same thing over and over. So I think if we think a little bit more long term, we can start to make sense. Now, does that help it make sense, or does that help people not see payment shock when you look at, hey, what is a payment on, $1 million house with 3.5% down FHA, which you can do, by the way, in San Diego because we're a high balance county. Then you can get a loan up to $977,500 on an FHA loan with 3.5% down. So you can buy $1 million place. You can buy $1 million place for 3.5% down. But the payment is going to be big. It's going to be big. It's going to give you shock when you look at it. There's no question. So, and that's a real thing. So if you are one of those people, and this is my advice for the day, Steve, and then I'll let you give yours. My advice for buyers is if that's where you are, you already know that you're either this person who hates renting or this person who wants to invest, generate, and create long-term wealth, whichever it is, you want to be a buyer, but you've gone through the process, you got pre-approved, you looked at the numbers, and it just scared the piss out of you. And you just went, golly, that's just so wild. I just can't fathom it. If you are in that position, here's what I really, really think you should do. Check up on that regularly and do it with the same house in mind. So not the same price point, the same house. So if you do that, like over time, if you say, oh, okay, well, I want to buy for $600,000 and you wait over time and you see rates go down, you're like, okay, the payment's getting better. But what are you able to purchase for that? And what has that house that you've been passing up on, what has it grown too. So you got to look at the same house. In other words, maybe not the exact same address, but like, hey, a 3-bed, 2-bath, detached in El Cajon or whatever. You look at that same kind of home, same size, and same lot approximately, and say, how much has that gone up? What has happened to that while I've been waiting? Because you need to know all aspects, all different pieces to the puzzle. How is all of it moving? If you just look at interest rates or if you just look at prices, at some point, you're not giving yourself the whole picture. And if you're trying to make a big decision, you want to have every piece of information digested. So if you're going to wait and you're going to study the market, make sure you study it like that. All right, Steve, what advice do you have?
Let me commend you here. I don't normally give you compliments, but I will give you one here. You do a great job of looking at data. And what I would say for the average consumer is recognize that there's a lot of moving pieces here, but this stuff, so it's a little bit, but it isn't overly difficult. You just got to get in and start to learn it. And so the biggest thing that I can recommend is exactly as Derrick is talking about, get data. Like, go look at houses and then see what they sell for and keep track of those and make a basic spreadsheet. My advice, I would say, is 2 different things. Number one is with pre-approvals. Number one, I highly recommend you reach out to Derrick and have him at least start the process. You don't have to buy anything, but it at least helps you understand, what do I qualify for? What can I purchase? But also, if there's any red flags along the way, he can help you build a strategy. We can help you build a plan. And that, my advice number one, a pre-approval letter is not a static document. It's not like you get a pre-approval letter 4 months ago and you're like, well, I'm approved, so let's just go look at houses. Stay connected with your lender. Stay connected and see, is there different opportunities? What does it look like with temporary buy downs, 2-1 buy downs, these kinds of things? As the interest rates have changed, is that good for me? Is that bad for me? I'm making more money. I now have a bonus. Should I put more money down? Should I go FHA? Like, having somebody that has a lot of that data is really helpful. And with that, so knowing that your pre-approval letter is not a static document, but is fluid, so should your wants and needs be. Like, dissect that. And you start out with your wants and needs, you and your spouse, you write down the stuff. Hey, this is what we want. 3-bedroom, got to have a minimum 2 full bathrooms, and absolutely need a 2-car garage. And then as you investigate the market, revisit that and look at that and go, sweetheart, why do we need a 2-car garage? Is it some status thing that we need our cars not to have morning fog on them? Like, what's the big reason? Why do we really need 3 bedrooms? Could we do 2 bedrooms? Could we do a townhome? Because the thought process is, real estate is a great long-term investment for us, and that we've heard that building wealth is through real estate. So let's figure out how we can make this happen. I think that so often people feel like they run into a wall, which is, I want a 2-car garage on a minimum of 8,000 square foot lot on a cul-de-sac only in these 2 zip codes. And then they look real quick and they go, nope, nothing for sale. Well, I guess we rent another year. Like, all good things come through a little bit of struggle. And I certainly agree that going through the real estate process, both on the buying side and on the selling side, come with a little bit of struggle. And I'm here to tell you, it's worth it. Like, it's worth it. It absolutely, look into it, build conversations with realtors, build a conversation with Derrick. There you go. There's my
boom. My
pitch.
man, Steve Ploetz, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for your contributions. I'm going to bring some music in here. I'm a one-man production, so it's just kind of, we just kind of do what we got to do. I'm going to leave you with a couple pieces of data that we didn't cover here.
Well, I like it.
Home prices in June. Okay. Turn it down just a little bit. Home prices in June hit record highs in 60% of U.S. housing markets. Home equity levels are now back within 3% of the peak, absolute all-time peak. And per homeowner, that means roughly $200,000 in equity on average per home. So it's not smoke, guys. It's truth. It's reality. It's not easy. As Steve said, we'll shoot you straight, but nothing that's great is easy. My suggestion for you is take action, whether that action is buying a house this year or making a plan about how you're going to set in motion the steps that will get you where you want to go. Both are acceptable. You don't just need to run out and buy a house, but you need to have a plan. You need to have a strategy. We are here to help, and that's exactly what we'll do Have a great evening.